بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فإن أحسن الكلام كلام الله وخير الهدى هدى محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وإن شر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار. Inshallah, to continue the series of topics that relate to the general theme of the conference or the seminar, which is looking at the situation and the condition of the Muslims today and speaking about the issues that relate to their rectification and correction. Then yesterday we spoke about al-ikhlas and how a servant should be concerned with correcting that which is between himself and his Lord as it relates to his sincerity in his actions and avoiding the pitfalls and the dangers of showing off, ar-riya and as-sum'a, and likewise doing actions which are actions of the hereafter but for worldly gain. And that because this is an issue which relates to the perfection of a person's Tawheed, and because Tawheed is from the greatest or is the greatest of the affairs of the religion, then no doubt that is an area of concern that every single Muslim, every single Salafi should pay a great amount of attention to in learning these issues and understanding these issues and applying these issues in their ibadah and their practice of the religion. So today, inshallah, I want to touch another issue which again relates to the condition of the Muslimin and the affairs of the Muslimin, and this is relating to the rulers and what has come in the Sunnah, what has come in the Quran, what has come in the Sunnah, and what has come in the manhaj of the Salaf in relation to how the Muslims are to deal with the rulers. And my lecture today, inshallah, is going to be divided into 3 sections. The first 2 sections will be very short, inshallah. And the first 2 sections, I just wanted to give some background information before I go into the main theme or the main content of the lecture, which will be 11 or 12 principles from the Quran and from the Sunnah that explain very clearly and explicitly how a Muslim should behave with those whom Allah has appointed over him, and the methodology that a Muslim should follow in relation to interacting with the rulers. So that will be the main part of the lecture, the third part. But before that, there are 2 sections that I want to speak about to help to put this subject into context. So the first part is if we look at the history of al-Islam and we look at how the deviations and the innovations appeared, the major innovations which appeared after the passing away of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the Khulafa al-Rashideen, al-Mahdiyyin. If we look at the nature as to how this occurred, then it will help us to understand in the recent times why we have so much confusion and so much misunderstanding relating to this subject, meaning the subject of the rulers and how the Muslims should deal with them, how they should behave with them, and so on and so forth. So first of all, we find that in the time of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the time after his passing away and the time of the Khulafa al-Rashideen al-Mahdiyyin, 30 or so years, we find that, alhamdulillah, there was no major problems or deviations. Nothing occurred. The Sahaba would, the Messenger would receive revelation. He would convey that revelation to the Sahaba. They would understand that revelation and believe in whatever it contained of the affairs of Aqeedah and implement whatever it contained of the affairs of the rulings. And this is how it was. And then, after the time of the Khulafa, starting roughly around the year 37 Hijrah, up until roughly 100 Hijrah, this was a time in which we saw the emergence of the 4 sects or the 4 groups or the 4 deviant beliefs, which are the beliefs of the Khawaarij, the beliefs of the Rafidah, the Shia, and the beliefs of the Qadariyyah, those people who deny a Qadar, and the belief of the Murji'ah, those people who don't believe that actions are from Iman, from the essence of Iman. But the point that I want to make here is that when you look at the deviations, the specific deviations, how did they originate and where did they come from? then that's the thing that we want to look at. So first of all, with respect to the Rafidah, the Shia, where did this belief and where did it originate from? We find that it was from a person by the name of Abdullah bin Saba, who was a Jew, and he came in the garb of Islam, and then he came to the Muslimin, and he began to praise and raise the position of Ali radiallahu anhu. And as is mentioned in the Athar from the Salaf, that this person, that he would come and he would pretend, or he would claim, that in all of the previous books that Allah revealed, and including the Tawrat, that in those revelations, it would be mentioned that all of the prophets had, if you like, a close companion, or someone whom he left as a legacy. And that legacy of the Prophet Muhammad is Ali radiallahu anhu. So this is what he would claim. He would bring these false narrations and false claims and spread them amongst the Muslimin so that they would raise Ali radiallahu anhu. So the point being that this belief from that time originated from where? It came from someone external to Islam, someone outside of al-Islam. Then likewise, the belief of, the false belief of rejecting al-Qadr, rejecting the divine predestination. We find that when we look in the books of history and the books of the Salaf, where they originate and trace where this belief came from, we find that they mention a person by the name of Al-Ma'bad Al-Juhani. A person by the name of Al-Ma'bad Al-Juhani. And how this person, he mixed and interacted with a Christian from Iraq, from the region of Iraq. And some of the scholars say, in some of the narrations, it mentions that this person's name was Sawsan. In other narrations, it says his name was Sansawayh. So irrespective of what his name was, he was a Christian. And Al-Ma'bad, he took the belief, or the belief of rejecting Al-Qadr from this Christian. And it is said that this Christian, he initially was a Christian, then he became a Muslim, then he reverted back to being a Christian. So this belief of Al-Qadr, and whatever followed on from that, then the Mu'tazila came afterwards and they took this belief. And again, the point here is, where did this belief originate from? It came from someone outside of al-Islam, external to Islam, in this case a Christian. And likewise, maybe another 60, 70, 80 years after this time, or close to 100 years after this time, now roughly about 200, 250 Hijrah, we see now the rise of the Mu'tazila. And the reason why the Mu'tazila, they gained prominence and why they gained lots of arguments and evidences for their batil was because the books of the Greek philosophers like Plato and Aristotle and Socrates, that these were translated. And the principles of Greek philosophy and logic, they were translated into Arabic. And that when these people, they saw what it contained, what these books contained, they found a new way of interpreting and looking at the verses in the Quran, especially the verses that speak about Allah's attributes, Allah's names. And then they began to use those principles in order to deny and to negate Allah's names and attributes. So where did this come from? It originated from outside of Islam, from the books of the Greek philosophers. So this is what we need to understand, that these deviations and these false beliefs and these innovations, where did they originate from? They originated from sources outside of al-Islam. So this is the first part, or the first introduction to my lecture. So keep this in mind, bear this in mind. Now the second part of my lecture, I want to cover the last 100 or last 120, 130 years of recent history. When we look at the Muslim nation, or the Muslim Ummah as a whole, and we look at what it went through in terms of colonization, and likewise at the same time, we saw in the lands of Europe many of these philosophies and ideologies like Marxism and socialism, and these and revolutions that occurred, and the philosophers who came and they began to speak about these ideologies. You find that around that time, in that period, like in the early 20th century up until the mid 20th century, this was the time when many of these major movements that we now see present in our times, like Ikhwaanul-Muslimoon, specifically the Muslim Brotherhood, we find, and likewise the so-called, the Jamaat-e-Islami, or this group which originated in Pakistan, India, we find that there were certain individuals who came during that time in the 30s, 40s, 50s, and I'll mention them specifically, the likes of Sayyid Qutb from Egypt, Hassan al-Banna from Egypt, and Maududi, Abu A'la Maududi from Pakistan, that these three individuals, when you go back and you study and you look into their works and the ideas that they propound in their works, you will find that just like those innovators of the early